Good morning, all. Today we are going to see about the hydrology in site planning, Unit 4 in site surveying and planning. Hydrology, branch of physical science which deals with the origin, distribution, and properties of water of Earth. It deals with the transportation of water through the air, over the ground surface, and through the Earth's strata. The sun heats the ocean. The ocean water evaporates and rises into the air. The water vapor cools and condenses to become droplets which from clouds. If enough water condenses, the drops become heavy enough to fall to the ground as rain and snow. Some rain collects in ground wells, the rest flows through rivers back onto the ocean. Hydrologic cycle. The hydrologic cycle begins with the evaporation of water from the surface of the ocean. As moist air is lifted, it cools and water vapor condenses to form clouds. Moisture is transported around the globe until it returns to the surface as precipitation. Components of hydrological cycles and its definition. Runoff. Runoff, it is the water flowing over the land making its way towards rivers, lakes, oceans, etc. as surface or subsurface flow. Surface runoff, it is the running water over the land and which ultimately discharge water to the sea. Subsurface runoff, the water getting infiltrated into previous soil mass making its way towards river and lakes can be termed as subsurface runoff. Precipitation, it is the fall of moisture from atmosphere to the earth's surface in any form. Example, rain, hail, snow, sleet, glaze, drizzle, snowflakes. Evaporation, it is the conversion of natural liquids like water into gaseous form like air. It is the conversion of vapor or gas to a liquid is called condensation. Transpiration, it is the evaporation taking place from any plant or greenery. Example, water droplets on a leaf getting evaporated into atmosphere. Evapotranspiration, it is the combination of evaporation and transpiration. Infiltration, it is the process of filtration of water to the inner layers of the soil based on its structures and nature. Pervious soils go through more infiltration than impervious. Infiltration in soils like sand, gravel, and coastal material is more and far finer soil particles like clay and silt infiltration is less. Infiltration is inversely proportional to runoff. In a soil, if infiltration is less, then runoff is more. Similarly, more infiltration gives less runoff. Example, bitumen roads have more runoff than metallic red mud roads. Irrigation. Irrigation is the process by which water is brought to the land through any of the variety of artificial means. The land that is being irrigated usually contains crops, grass or vegetation that would not usually receive enough water from rainfall or other natural sources. Sometimes the reason to irrigate a portion of land is that it happens to be a dry season with less than average amount of rainfall, while other times it is necessary to do so because the land never would receive enough water on its own to be fertile. The water that is used for irrigation may be taken from nearby lakes, reservoirs, rivers, or wells. The amount of water that is to be used for irrigation is dependent on the type of crop that is being formed as well as the amount of rainfall associated with the climate of the region where the farm is located. Water that is brought to the farm from the source of surface water, such as lake or reservoir, is usually done so through a series of canals. When the source is groundwater from the well, the water is pumped to the surface and transported to the farm via a network of pipes. What are the types of irrigation? Irrigation, generally we have surface irrigation and subsurface irrigation. In previous unit itself, we have seen lot about what is surface and what is subsurface. And in surface, we'll have flow irrigation, lift irrigation, flood irrigation, basin irrigation, furrow irrigation, check basin irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, dip irrigation. In subsurface, we have subsurface dip irrigation alone. Types of irrigation, surface irrigation. In surface irrigation systems, water is moving over the land by simple gravity flow in order to wet it and to infiltrate into the soil. Surface irrigation is the application of water to the fields at ground level. Either the entire field is flooded or the water is directed into flood reservoirs. Surface irrigation is also called flood irrigation. They can be subdivided into furrow irrigation, border strip irrigation, basin irrigation. Subsurface irrigation. Subsurface irrigation is a highly efficient watering technique that reduces outdoor water use by 30 to 40%. The system consists of drip irrigation, tubing planted about 5 inches below the surface. The water goes straight to your lawn's roots and it does not blow away or run down the sidewalk. Furrow irrigation, you can see the furrow irrigation in this image. There are some ups and downs. The down is called furrow and up is called ridge. And furrows are narrow ditches dug on the field between the rows of crops, and it seeds vertically and horizontally to refill the soil reservoir. The field to be irrigated is divided into strips, also called as borders or border strips, by border ridges. The water is released from the field ditch onto the border through gate structures called outlets. Water can also be released by means of siphons and spiles. The sheet of flowing water moves down the slope of the border, guided by the border ridges. You can see it in the images. There are ditches, the size of the ditches, and 10 to 20 meter for every 10 to 20 meter width, there is a lane. Basin irrigation. Basin are the horizontal flat plots of land surrounded by small dikes or bunds. The banks prevent the water from flowing to the surrounding fields. Basin irrigation is commonly used for rice grown on flatlands or in terraces on the hillsides. Trees can be grown in basins, where one tree usually is located in the center of the small basin. So, this is a small basin. Localized irrigation. Localized irrigation is a system where water is distributed under low pressure through a piped network in a predetermined pattern and applied as a small discharge to the each plant or adjacent to it. Dip irrigation, spray or micro sprinkler irrigation, and bubble irrigation belong to this category of irrigation methods. Drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is a form of irrigation that saves water and fertilizer by allowing water to drip slowly to the roots of many different plants, either onto the soil surface or directly onto the root zone through a network of valves, pipes, tubing, and emitters. You can see this type of drip irrigation through this image. There are dripping through the pipes, there where dripping is happening. You can see in the exact picture from which the main tube is running, from which you are getting the dripping, water dripping in the pipe holes of the pipes. Spray or micro sprinkler irrigation. Method of applying irrigation water which is similar to natural rainfall. Water is distributed through a system of pipes, usually by pumping. It is sprayed into the hair through sprinkler so that it breaks up into smaller water droplets which fall to the ground. In sprinkler or overhead irrigation, water is piped to one or more central locations within the field and distributed by overhead high-pressure sprinklers or guns. A system utilizing sprinklers, sprays or guns mounted overhead on permanently installed risers is often referred to as a solid set irrigation system. Subsurface irrigation, which involves subsurface drip irrigation. Subsurface drip irrigation is a low pressure, high efficiency irrigation since it is doing in the subsurface. That uses buried drip tubes or drip tape to meet crop water needs. Subsurface irrigation saves water and improves yields by eliminating surface water evaporation and reducing the incidence of weeds and disease. And you can see the difference between the surface dripping and subsurface dripping, where the pipes were installed in the surface here, and here we are the pipe is installed in the subsurface. Here the advantage is the evaporation of water won't happen. Coming to the next slide, we are talking about the soil here. Soil has three types, that is granular, cohesive, and granular cohesiveness, in which granular has less than 15% of silt and clay soil, and cohesive has 15% silt and clay, and the other category has more than 15% clay. In the first typology, it has no plasticity, and second, it has plasticity, and again the third category don't have the plasticity. A granular soil means gravel, sand, or silt with little or no clay content. Granular soil has no cohesive strength. Granular soil cannot be molded. Cohesive soil means clay or soil with a high clay content which have cohesive strength. Cohesive soil do not crumble, can be excavated with vertical side slopes and is plastic when moist. Cohesive soil is hard to break up when dry and exhibits significant cohesion when submerged. Cohesive soils include clay silt, sandy clay, silt clay, and organic clays. So this is cohesionless soil that we can see in the image is any free running type of soil such as sand or gravel whose strength depends on friction between particles, also may be referred as to be frictionless soil. So we can see these layers. So in the bottom we have a layer of solid rock that is called bedrock, and above that we will be having layer of rock particles mixed with very little humus, and again above that we'll be having layer of humus mixed with rock particles, and after that we'll be having a very thin layer of decomposing leaves, next the layer of dead leaves, litters and humus. Soil is classified on the basis of percentage of gravel, sand and fines, shape of grain, plasticity and compressibility characteristics. Soil particle size ranges from largest to smallest, that is cobbles, gravels, sand, fines consisting of clay or silt. So generally gravel will have coarse plus fine type of soil, and sand will be having coarse, medium and fine all together, the particles. The fines consisting of clay or silt. These properties of soils generally depends on the color, texture, tilth, water holding capacity, drainage, depth and slope. Soils and site. Sandy soil. It has a gritty texture because it is formed from small particles of weathered rock. It is a good soil of building structures because it allows water to drain away from a building site but will not shift or move. Sand may be compacted to add additional stability to the soil. Because sand particles have irregular shapes, the fragments will catch against one another and lock into place, providing additional stability. Bedrock, the soil underlying layer of rock beneath shallow topsoil, is an ideal foundation for a home because it is impermeable to water runoff and will not change shape and size in presence of water. Bedrock does not slide, shift or move. Homes constructed over strong bedrock do not have cracks in them from settling the way that homes built over expansive clay may. So it won't move because it is not expansive. The soil won't be expansive since bedrock is heavy. The chalky soil. Chalky soil is a type of clay soil that is formed from extremely fine particles of alkaline rocks such as limestone. Unlike most clay, chalky soil is an ideal for building because the soil will not retain moisture and will not swell and shrink seasonally due to the presence or absence of water, and it won't change generally because of the presence or absence of water. Loamy soils are an intermediate soil halfway between sand and clay. The soil is typically as a mix of organic material, sand, and clay. Loamy soils that have large undercomposed vegetation in them may shift as the vegetation decomposes, but will not shift due to the presence or absence of water. So this is also good for the good construction soil. Surface investigations, soils and site. So what are the investigations that have to be made in the surface of the soil and site? First is eye water table level, where the level of water is high. Presence of troubled soils, soft clay, loose silt, or fine water bearing sands. Rock close to the surface require blasting for excavations. Dumps or fills, evidence of slides or subsidence. Next is a bearing capacity. Safe bearing capacity of the soil is the maximum intensity of the loading that the soil will safely carry without the risk of shear failure, irrespective of any settlement that may occur. Angle of repose, the maximum slope measured in degrees from the horizontal at which loose solid material will remain in the place without sliding. So above ground indicators of soil conditions near buildings require shoring or earth and existing foundations. Rock outcropping indicate bedrock good for bearing and frost resistance, bad for excavations. Water lake indicate high water table, some waterproofing of foundation is required. Level terrain, easy site work, fair bearing but poor drainage. Gentle slopes, easy site work and excellent drainage. Convex terrain, dry solid place to build. Concave terrain, wet soft place to build. Steep terrain, costly excavations, potential erosions and sliding soils. Foliage, some trees indicate moist soil, large trees indicate solid ground. So according to this chart, we can identify the type of soil and whether it is suitable for construction or any other works. Soil as rock minerals, water and air. Soil also has living things and dead things in it. We call the living and dead things organic matter. Soil is made of four things. It has rock pieces and rocks are made of minerals. It has dead and living things, organic matter and humus. It has water, it has air. Soil texture. Every soil has different amounts of sand and silt and clay. The mix of sand and silt and clay is the texture of the soil. The soil with a lot of sand is called a sandy soil texture. A soil with a lot of silt is called a silt soil texture. A soil with a lot of clay is called clay soil texture. The soil structure. The smallest part of soils are sand and silt and clay. The small parts join to make larger parts we call clumps and aggregates. The clumps are made when sand and silt and clay stick together. The humus in clay and minerals in the soil are like glue. The soil with small round clumps is the best because it lets in air and water. Building foundation need to be on the stable and strong soils. Soils range in strength. Some soils are able to support a skyscraper while the other soils are not able to support the weight of a human. If the soil under your building is not stable, the foundation of the building could crack, sink, or worse, the building could fall. The strength and stability of the soil depend on its physical properties. Soil with good structure is more stable. However, a mix of particle sizes is the best for engineering. It is also important that soil is stable through wetting and drying cycles so that expanding soil does not crack roads or fountains. Some clay minerals from a family called smectite are more likely to shrink and expand during wetting and drying cycles. Good soil should also have ability to capture precipitation so that the runoff and erosion do not damage structures. Soil bearing capacity. In geotechnical engineering, bearing capacity is the capacity of soil to support the loads applied to the ground. The bearing capacity of the soil is the maximum average contact pressure between the foundation and the soil, which should not produce shear failure in the soil. How can we improve the bearing capacity of the soil? Techniques used for improving bearing capacity of the soil: increasing depth of the foundation, draining the soil, compacting the soil, replacing the poor soil, using grouting stabilizing material. So these are the safe bearing capacity of the different soils. Water table. Water table is the surface where the water pressure head is equal to the atmospheric pressure. It may be conveniently visualized as the surface of the subsurface materials that are saturated with groundwater in a given vicinity. The water table may vary due to seasonal changes in precipitation, evapotranspiration, topography, and structural geology. In undeveloped regions with the permeable soils that receive sufficient amount of precipitation, the water table typically slopes towards rivers that have to drain the groundwater away and release the pressure in the aquifer. Springs, rivers, lakes, and oases occur when the water table reaches the surface. Aquifer is underground layer of water-bearing permeable rock or unconsolidated material sand. Sieve map. Sieve mapping is the constraints and opportunities mapping process that builds up a number of geographical layers to produce a visual representation of areas that slow less potential for future settlement growth. A sieve map is the composite map showing characteristics of land which render it unsuitable for a particular purpose. Such characteristics are termed as constraints. The composite map is formed from the series of maps showing single constraints which are drawn on the transparent paper. Constraint layers and scoring. Layers that have been applied in the sieve mapping process are listed below. The layers marked with an asterisk have been mapped as the potential opportunity layers. All other layers are constraints. Slope instability hazards, protected trees, historic flooding hazard, slopes that receive the least sun, waterways, historic buildings, objects and areas, landscape protection areas, sacred sites, areas of lesser landscape value, archaeological sites, reserves, roads including state highways, setbacks, community water supply protection zone, recommended areas for protection, setbacks from wastewater treatment plants, areas within 250 meters of reticulated water supply, areas within 250 meters of reticulated wastewater scheme, coastal hazards, potentially contaminating zones. Matrix analysis. In matrix type of analysis, the most important and significant parameters analyzed, the elements are taken into consideration for analysis, decisions making or working out proposals or alternatives are done. These are the matrix. Proximity. Decision matrix. The decision matrix is basically an array presenting on one axis a list of alternatives, also called options or solutions. These are evaluated recording on the axis a list of criteria which are weighted dependently on their respective importance in the final decisions to be taken. This is also known as comparison matrix. grid analysis, performance matrix, evaluation matrix. Extensively used in comparison studies of site alternatives in the selection process of a site. Can be used to evaluate between several sites for the same project or for one site itself. Decision matrix activity. In creations in creating a decision matrix, use the COWS method shown below that describes all the information you should come up with in order to the decision. COWS. C stands for criteria and O stands for options and W stands for weights and S stands for scores. Criteria. Develop a hierarchy of decision criteria, also known as decision model, and option. Identify options, also called as solutions or alternatives. Assign a weight to each criterion based on the importance of the final decision. Scores. Rate each option on ratio scale by assigning it as a score or rating against each criteria. Composite analysis. A composite analysis is a drawing which combines and summarizes the layers of information previously gathered and interpreted during the inventory process, beginning within a base map of the site. In each layer of information from the inventory is added to the base map, a series of zones will become apparent which reflect the characteristics of included layers. Basement, layer, composite layer. Construction documents, master plans, concept plans, composite analysis. On the method of interpreting the information during the site inventory and analysis is the overlay method. Benefits of composite analysis. The composite analysis provides a means of simplifying a large quantity of complex information into a form which can be used as a design tool. Since it will be used as a decision-making tool during the design process, the composite analysis provides an ideal opportunity to identify and emphasize the importance of the existing natural drainage features on the site. In addition, this stage will help developers to see the limitations of the site. See some portions of the site will have relatively few development constraints, while others will have many. Layers which will present physical limitations to development include steep slopes, soil constraints, and vegetation patterns. Other layers will dictate where development can or cannot occur regardless of physical limitations. These areas include property lines, setbacks, right of way, easements, buffer, or other restricted zones. The composite analysis should note site features which offer advantage as well as disadvantage. Attractive views, access points for circulation, access to utilities, site amenities or climatical features, all as well as the portions of the site which have existing drainage features or the significant vegetation should be noted so that these elements can be incorporated in the site. Disadvantages such as odors, noise, unattractive views, or proximity to conflicting land uses should be taken into consideration. Once the various layers of the information have been gathered and brought to the common scale, they can be overlaid and evaluated to determine which portions of the site are best suited to the development of each component of the intended land use. The process of overlaying the various layer information can be conducted manually with clear overlay sheets or digitally by using computer. The composite of the site inventory drawings will reveal the location and severity of constraints to proposed development. Those areas which have the fewest or least severe constraints would typically be best suited to the most components of the development program. Constraints may dictate adjustment in the design for very small sites or sites which are not complex. A simpler method of evaluating development constraints can be used, especially by the individuals with significant development experience. Sewage and stormwater disposal. Sewage is a term used for wastewater that often contains toilet, laundry waste, and kitchen waste. It consists mostly of grey water from sinks, tubs, showers, dishwashers, and cloth washers. That we can see in the image what is black water and the grey water. Why is sewage disposal important? Wastes can be hazardous and can contaminate the environment if not handled properly. It causes disease or get into water supplies. So clean water, spring wells, purified water, city water, rainwater. Grey water is used water without toxic, and black water is a contaminated water. The importance of managing sewer includes improving the environment through proper drainage and disposal of wastewater, preventing floods through removal of rainwater, preserving receiving water quality. The sewage treatment process facilitates the achievement of water quality on objects. In addition to nutrients recycling, advanced treatment of wastewater often includes associated unit process which supports the optimization of resource use. Some of these unit processes include the conversion of sludge into various beneficial byproducts and the process of extracting thermal energy from the sewage and wastewater. In addition, the sewage collection system can be used as a conduit for optical fiber cables and other communication infrastructure. What is sewage treatment? Sewage treatment includes physical, biological, and sometimes chemical process to remove pollutants. It aims to produce an environmentally safe sewage water called effluent and a soil waste called sludge or biosolids suitable for disposal or reuse. Objectives of wastewater treatment. The objectives of municipal and industrial wastewater treatment is to extract pollutants, remove toxicants, neutralize coarse particles, kill pathogens, so that quality of discharged water is improved to reach the permissible level of water to discharge into water bodies for agricultural land. Treatment of water aims at reduction of biochemical oxygen demand, chemical oxygen demand, and the enrichment of waters by organic plant nutrients of receiving water bodies and prevention of biomagnification of toxic substance in the food chain. Benefits includes reduced freshwater extractions from rivers and aquifers, less impact from the septic tank and treatment plant infrastructure, reduced energy use and chemical pollution from treatment, groundwater recharge, greater quality of surface and groundwater. So these are the steps involved in wastewater treatment. Primary, secondary, and tertiary treatments. You can see the GIF image. Coarse debris screen, where the wastewater in which the coarse have been segregated through the filter, and the sand and grit removal. Then the sand and small grits will be removed. Primary clarification, solid sludge will be removed. Then it is converted to the liquid, and the secondary process starts where aeration clarifications will be done. Through the activation sludge, the liquid sludge is removed and pure water is sent to the tertiary treatment where it is chlorinated and nutrient removal will happen. Effluent water will come out. So as we seen in the image, the same has been described below. The preliminary treatment screening in the treatment debris, gross solids, grit, oil and grease are removed by passing wastewater through screens, grit chambers and skimming tanks. Primary treatment includes filtering out large objects like cotton buds, rags, and other rubbish using fine screens, aerating the sewage to remove fiber or thick particles like grit and sand, sedimentation where heavy items sink into the bottom forming a layer called sludge. The settled sludge and floating debris is pumped to larger tanks known as digesters, which is broken down by bacteria. Primary treatment, this is the process that we already seen. Secondary treatment, which is in which we'll be seeing the screening, sedimentation, primary sludge is removed and effluent for secondary treatment, sludge thickening, anaerobic digestion, and sludge disposal. Again, in the other process, it is activated sludge, aerobic digestion, sedimentation, effluent. Method and installation description. Anaerobic treatments on wastewater are normally implemented when treating more concentrated wastewater. The anaerobic sludge contains various group of microorganisms that works together eventually convert organic material to biogas via hydrolysis and acidification. Biogas typically consists of 70% methane and 30% carbon dioxide with residual fractions of other gases. The methane can be used as a energy source. The specific advantages and disadvantages includes first is advantages. Advantages include formation of biogas. The encountered organic pollutant is converted into biogas with a high energetic value. This, for example, allows the energy needed to operate the water purification system. Very little sludge production. Disadvantages: incomplete breakdown of organic compounds, need for post purification via, for example, aerobic purification, no thorough nutrient removal. Again, later aerobic purification with nutrient removal is often needed. Risk of odor problems. Secondary treatment. In secondary treatment, the method is followed. Tertiary treatment. The tertiary treatment is a final treatment meant for abolishing the secondary effluents and removal of fine suspended solids, traces of organics and bacteria. The sewage effluent from secondary treatment plant is introduced into a flocculation tank where lime is added to eliminate calcium phosphate. The solution then enters NH3 ammonia shipping tower. Nitrogen present in wastewater exists as NH4, which is converted to gaseous ammonium ion at high pH level. The phosphorus is removed by adding ferric chloride aluminum sulfate. The remaining organic matter are removed by desalination. The toxic non-biodegradable chemical in wastewater can be removed by adsorption, ion exchange, ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, and electrodialysis. Tertiary treatment, in which will be in 2012 the plant was upgraded to treat effluent of an advanced tertiary standard. This process adds several additional steps including ozone and UV disinfection, biological filtration to reduce ammonia, oil and grease, foam, litter and solids, and chlorination. Drinking water treatment. So after these three treatments, so drinking water treatment will happen where pre-oxidation, coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, and filtration, disinfection. After that, this goes to distribution system. So what is stormwater? Surface water in abnormal quantity resulting from heavy falls of rain or snow is called stormwater. The difference between stormwater and sewage connections that you can see in the picture, that the stormwater is clearly explained and the sewage water connection is clearly explained through two images. The effects of poor stormwater management: downstream flooding, stream bank erosion, increased turbidity from erosion, habitat destruction, combined sewer overflows, infrastructure damage, contaminated streams, rivers, and coastal water. The advantages and disadvantages includes provides proper drainage of surface runoff and avoids damages on infrastructure such as private properties and streets. Provides possibility to recharge groundwater and reuse precipitation water and water runoff as irrigation or household water, minimizing health risk. Provides effective stormwater flood control, can be integrated into the urban landscape and provide green and recreational areas. Revenue generated by the stormwater utility can be used as a new dedicated source of funds to supplement or replace a community's current stormwater management funding, enabling tax-based funding to be used for the other community needs. Disadvantages: it includes expert planning, implementation, operation, and maintenance required for your stormwater management. It depends on the technique, a lot of operation and labor required. There is a risk of clogging in filtration system caused by high sediment rates. Temporary covering methods such as plastic sheeting can become torn or ripped, exposing the contaminant to precipitation and or stormwater runoff.